Yo, everybody. Here's the deal. We're taking a look at Washington's issues, and today we're going to be talking about the Whiskey Rebellion. Before we get to the Whiskey Rebellion, I'm going to try to give you a recap about what was going on with the other domestic issues, and they all revolve around his cabinet choices and the split that comes from the first major issue, which is Hamilton's economic plans. So, without further ado, uh, you should be able to watch this video on the set of slides that I'll provide. So we skip on here. We've got a political cartoon featuring George Washington. He's got the Constitution. He's got a stern, strict look. He's wearing his military uniform, and he's got this bottle that's labeled Pennsylvania Whiskey, vintage 1794. That's the year that the Whiskey Rebellion is really going to explode. And the big question is he shaking it up or is he clamping down? And the caption up here, the title caption, says bottling up the Whiskey Rebellion. So obviously he's trying to clamp it down and keep it inside that bottle, take care of the problem. He's not trying to stir it up and have it explode like a bottle of champagne. So we're going to go through that. But more important is our recap of what has been going on with Mr. Washington. So it's going to come from the Department of Treasury, and the Secretary of Treasury is Alexander Hamilton. The debt was $77 million, over $77 million. 40.4 was the national government's debt. 25 million was what the different states owed. And remember, Alexander Hamilton's one of his major ideas is he wants to assume the state's debts and put it on the back of the national government. Seems like a nice little treat for the states, but when you really think about money matters, that's going to give all the credit for the debt to the national government. That's going to make the federal government look stronger and better if they can repay it, which they are going to be able to. So that's going to make the federal government look more attractive to foreign investors, foreign traders. And the states are also then going to be kind of beholden and invested in the federal government. If the federal government goes under, then they get those loans back and bad news. The last part of the debt was $11 million to foreign countries, mostly France, some to the Netherlands, and some to Spain. But the big deal is France here. And so let's see, man, the big question is who are we going to pay off first? Should we pay back our own citizens who sacrificed and scrimped and bought bonds, or should we repay those foreign countries? Well, Hamilton must have dealt with the mafia before and he wants to protect his kneecap. So he wants to first pay off the foreign debt. He wants to look good on the big like economic spreadsheet. They didn't have Excel back then, but he wants to look good to foreign investors and he wants our country to have a stable economy. So he wants to pay off those foreign countries just maybe so they don't come and invade and like beat us up. Anyways, we were pretty weak, brand new country, we're in a ton of debt. Yeah. And then he wants to gradually repay the American citizens for all the bonds they bought. So a couple things there. Remember, Hamilton is he's a city guy. He's a New Yorker. He's a merchant, manufacturer. He wants business, business, business. He's a federalist. He wants the federal government to kind of get all jacked and big and powerful. Hamilton is that federalist type. On the other hand, the next slide, never mind. Shoot, I was going to talk about Jefferson, how Jefferson is the opposite. Jefferson is he's the guy that's always looking out for the common man, the little guy, the farmer. He is kind of like an anti-federalist as well. So the political party for Jefferson and the South and all that stuff, that's going to be the Democratic Republicans. So more focused on the people, the democracy, the republic. Whereas Hamilton and the Federalists, they want the federal government to be strong. So Jefferson is going to be a little ticked that Hamilton doesn't want to repay our own citizens first because just like in 2020 and 2021 with the COVID crisis, there's a lot of Americans that don't have jobs and they're having trouble paying rent, paying their bills. And there's the economic stimulus package. Should we take care of our own citizens? Well, right now, today, it just went through and we're going to spend 1.9 trillion to get money to where it needs to go. That's what Jefferson, I think, would have wanted. I think Hamilton isn't too worried about the people. We need to keep the stock market going, something like that. And that's the one. I don't know. I don't know about the comparison. I'd say overall, I think Jefferson's ideas are kind of a cooler, better idea. But then Hamilton's ideas are like the real world. So take back what I was saying about this current COVID stuff. I don't know if I can delete that. But anyways, this is something I play with my students every year. And the big idea is I set up this kind of rigged simulation for all my students. And what ends up happening is kids get a roll with a card. You can see they've got different cash amounts or bonds. And then the goal is I'll get rid of that caption bar. The goal is to be patriotic. During the war, Americans wanted to help our government. Our government needed cash right now to pay for uniforms, bullets, ships, salaries, all that stuff. And so the goal was, I'm going to get a little certificate and a bond certificate from my government. I'm going to pay 25 bucks on it, and in a year or so, it's going to be worth 50. Okay, that way my government gets instant cash, and I get a slow, steady investment. It's not going to make me rich, but it's a good thing to do, and it'll pay off in the end if our country's successful. Remember, for a decade, our country wasn't very successful. So what ends up happening is if Hamilton isn't going to pay off those bonds at full value right away, because they've come to that maturation period, they've matured. If Hamilton wants to pay off foreign debt first, then these people are out of luck. Well, actually, what usually happens in our game, these people are out of luck. Sometimes these people, because what I have is like little chance cards, and it mirrors life. You have another kid. Now your groceries cost $200 a month, so you got to plunk down $200 cash. Your mortgage payment just came up. You owe $500 for your 10-acre farm, whatever. And so what happens in that game is most of these kids start going broke. So they have a bunch of bonds, but just like in real life, you can't pay for things in bonds. You can't go to the store and pay for your groceries and diapers in bonds. So what would happen is these kids, merchants, craftsmen that had cash on hand, they would start kind of preying on their unfortunate classmates and say, hey, that $100 bond, I'll give you, I don't know, 20 bucks for it. And so what happens when the game goes on is a lot of kids start going bankrupt and they have to sell up their bonds at minuscule values. And these people start they have like more cash to take on that risk. I have a feeling America will do fine. And for a while, America's economy, Spain is messing with us, England's messing with us, France is messing with us, Native Americans, problems this, new businesses don't do that well. So yada, yada, bing, bang. What ends up happening is, many of our students become bankrupt and have to sell up their bonds, whereas there's some that have that extra money, they can wait out the risk of it. And then when they do get paid off, the bonds get paid off eventually at full value, those speculators who kind of gambled on the bonds, they get paid off, and the little guy is stuck. And what happens here is, from this political cartoon, we see that George Washington is going to go with Hamilton's plans pretty much every time. So I wouldn't say that Washington is a Federalist, but he leans towards Federalist policies, at least when it comes to money. Because like I said, it's like the reality side. Hamilton, he was okay with us copying England. He wants us to be a superpower, and you know what? You got to do that sometimes. So Hamilton's priority, he wants to have a strong, stable economic situation for the United States. And Jefferson is always going to be the guy that opposes Hamilton on everything. And let's see, part B, that was not repaying off, or so let's see, not paying off bonds at full value kind of right away. So like we said, that squeezes the little guy, that squeezes the common man. So is there a compromise in all that economic stuff? When it comes to a national bank, let's see. No, not too. I mean, okay, you can say, well, yeah, 20-year charter. There's a 20-year limit. That's not much. And they have to make state banks too to balance out the national bank. Yeah, but I mean, pretty much George Washington does what Hamilton wants. That's on page 201 of your textbook. And then there's also the whole national bank. Is there a power given to Congress to create a national bank? Well, it comes down to loose versus strict construction. And we kind of mentioned it's like Legos. There's the kids that follow the directions to a T. That's strict construction. Same thing with following the Constitution. The Constitution says you guys can do this. It never says you can create a national bank, so you can't create a national bank. And then there's Hamilton. So Jefferson would have been the strict constructionist. Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans. Remember, they're kind of like anti-federalists. They don't want a strong central government. So if the government's going to do something, you better believe they're looking at their Constitution saying, wait, check. Nope, doesn't say that. You can't do it. Whereas Hamilton's saying, I've got the Trump card. That used to mean something different. I don't know about now. But Trump card is Article 1, Section 8, Clause number 18. They didn't have elastic back then. What was that thing called? Necessary and proper. And so basically Hamilton, every time something comes up, he's going to say, necessary and proper clause. Boom. It's necessary and proper. We need a bank. We got to pay stuff. We got to collect taxes. What are we going to do? Put stuff it under our mattress? No, we need a national bank. So Hamilton is going to be the loose constructionist, and he's going to find the leeway. He's going to find, doesn't say we can't, so technically we can. Yeah. So we're going to get a deal about that with the national bank. The capital, man, the South is kind of tripping because, let's see, Wall Street is in New York City. New York City was the first capital of the United States. So, man, we better get something. and now you want a national bank there too. Okay, have your bank. That's going to be New York City. Have your Wall Street, but capital, move it on down here. So remember, that's that Hamilton song, "The Room Where," I'm not going to sing. Never mind. Something about sausage getting made. Ugly stuff going on in a room where there's a little negotiation. Hamilton, Madison, and Jefferson sit down and they hammer out this deal. We are going to get a national bank, but we're also going to move the capital to Washington, D.C. in the South. That way they can have a little bit more political influence there. And that's what Hamilton can offer to the southern states. Washington signs off on it. So to get revenue is the money that the government is going to get. And there's two ways in this case that the government can get it. Taxes and sell bonds. And so the two taxes are going to be planned by Hamilton. Tariffs on imports. That means anything coming from a foreign country, we're going to tax it. Seems like a great idea because the price of Hondas, Toyotas, Volkswagens, for you guys, all your Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Porsches, prices on foreign cars are going to go up. I know they didn't have cars back then. I'm just trying to do something you guys can attach to here. Whereas Fords and Chevys, Dodges, GMCs, Cadillacs, no one buys Lincolns anymore. Those prices can stay the same. They'll be lower. More Americans, when we talk about economics, we got to talk about a logical consumer, not eighth graders who would buy a Supreme cloth or a Supreme brick or a Supreme car for like way too much money. But a logical consumer would say, all right, the American company's prices are here. Ooh, those foreign prices just went up here. Haha, I'm going to buy American because A, it's cheaper and I'm a logical consumer. B, I'm patriotic. I want America to do better. The more I buy, the more American businesses are going to do better. If American businesses are do better and selling more, they're going to need more factories. So they're going to build more factories. More factories means they need more jobs. That means more Americans getting jobs. More Americans getting paychecks. That means there's more going on in the American economy. And those Americans with jobs, with paychecks, are going to buy more American goods. And this is going to be great and amazing. Tariffs are the problem solver for everything. Not quite. We'll get to that. Part two of Hamilton's tax plan is he's going to have an excise tax on luxuries. Now, again, not just Bugattis and Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Porsches. It's a little cut off here. That means luxuries are also things that just aren't necessary. They can be expensive, but they're also just things that aren't like staples that everyone needs. Not staples like for a stapler, like staple goods. Now, here's the deal. Here's a tariff in action. We've got British cloth over here. It costs $4 a roll, but if we put a 25% tax on it, that's another $1. So if you go to the store in this place over here, right there, you've got British cloth for $5 or American-made cloth, $4 a roll. We're going to buy American every time. And like that, expanding America. This is the most amazing thing. However, let's take a look at tariffs. Are they perfect? I should have a slide right here. Come on. There we go. So what is cheaper? Well, the American stuff should be cheaper and the foreign stuff should be more expensive. But wait a minute, are tariffs good? Yeah, we talked about that. Is there a bad side? Well, let's see. We said that, cloth or that foreign car is going to cost this much. Are the American companies really going to say, look, our stuff is cheaper. Yay, this is good for America. Or are they going to say, hey, look, that stuff is 25% more expensive. Guys, we can raise our prices right about there. And Americans will still buy it. Shoot, we can raise it to right about there. And Americans will still buy it because it's the patriotic thing to do. That's great. So think about it. For the average consumer, prices will still go up because it's profit. That's what's going to happen. The other thing is, another downside, you think these other foreign countries are just going to sit there and go, oh, baby America just put a tax on us, a tariff on us? Oh, boy. No, they're going to tax American stuff. So back in the other countries, guess what? American prices are going to be super high. There's going to be no foreign markets or foreign buyers for our stuff. There's one other negative thing I can think about tariffs. In the South, they're farmers. They're not manufacturers. They're not merchants. They're farmers. They're producing all the raw materials. So while there's more demand from the northern factories and stuff, that's good. But now the English factories aren't going to be buying as much cotton for their cotton cloth. So we're going to sell less to foreign countries of our raw materials, and everything I need to grow my cotton, tools, shovels, all those manufactured goods, tractors, plows, whatever we want to say, all the costs of those manufactured items that are manufactured somewhere else are going to be more expensive for me, the southern farmer. So we get a major split between our regions. The South, the Democratic, Republican, that's where their political party centered. The South, they're not going to love tariffs. They're protective tariffs are not protecting the South. They're protecting the North, the New England factories, New England merchants. So that's what's going on there. So it's not a silver bullet. Tariffs, not perfect. All right, so this is getting to the core issue of taxes and Hamilton's plan. Government needs revenue. We need to pay off debts. We need money to do that. The bond thing, we got that going. What should we tax? Cigarettes, yachts, and private planes. Okay, like again, a slightly modern example. Or should we tax bread or diapers? Lots of people eat bread. Like everyone eats bread. Maybe a little tax on that. Now, one thing here is just because it's equal doesn't mean it's fair. Like we said, everyone's going to be eating bread. Everyone's going to be buying diapers for their kids. And you want kids in your country, or else you won't have a country in the future. French Revolution and Russian Revolution both started by women who were ticked off about prices on bread and probably diapers too. You don't want to tick off your base. If you remember your social hierarchy from seventh grade, you got 90% of the people that aren't nobles, that aren't rich, that aren't elite. They're going to suffer under bread and diaper taxes. So now what do we tax? Well, either of those. That's fine. Let's kind of cut the chase here. I'll come back to that issue. There's two main things to study with the Whiskey Rebellion. One thing to think about as just a normal human being in the United States as a functional citizen, the big picture, versus what you should memorize and answer on this stuff as a history student. So first thing, when we talk about rebellions, there's something to compare to. Shays' Rebellion. If you remember the Shays' Rebellion episode, that kind of crushed the Articles of Confederation and pointed out every single weakness, and it was embarrassing. This Whiskey Rebellion is going to be handled much differently. If we talk again about Shays' Rebellion, the cause of Shays' Rebellion was taxes. And I would say that it wasn't the fairest, when you really look back at the documentation, it wasn't the fairest system. And Shays really suffered under that one. And so did he break the law? Yeah, he started a rebellion. He closed down courthouses with guns. It's not exactly something to cheer on, but when you look at it, remember, he lost his right to vote. And that, to me, breaks the social contract. I know you can't see it because that thing says, did they break the social contract? Yeah, so to me, while he broke the law, yes. Was he morally justified? In my mind, yes, because his right to vote was taken away. The American Revolution was all about no taxation without representation. If you take away a person's right to vote, he or she has no representation. So there's our major dilemma in that one. That's why I give Shays' Rebellion the pass. Whereas here in the Whiskey Rebellion, it's going to be based on taxes again, but we're talking about excise taxes. It wasn't the tariff that anyone really cared about. I mean, the Southerners didn't love that. But this is going to happen in Western Pennsylvania with farmers. And it's going to be an excise tax on whiskey. An excise tax is a tax. You want to make money off that, or the government wants to make money. But it's also going to decrease consumption. It's going to be a deterrent because the price is going up. We have that nowadays on gas. Well, it causes major problems with the climate, causes a lot of wear and tear on roads, air, all that jazz. So is it fair that we put a tax on it? I don't know about fair. It's definitely it's tougher on poor people than rich people. We'll skip that for this year. But what we want to look at here is this whiskey tax. The Western farmers are going to think this is so unfair. This is terrible. This is a major thing we do with all the grain we produce. We distill it into whiskey. It's a way of life for us. Well, guess what? The rich people also had an excise tax that affected them. There was a tax on carriages. The whiskey tax was also lowered. It did start at 25%, which is pretty huge, but it was lowered. And then the whiskey rebels still could not handle that. They thought they were really being picked on. This was unfair. It broke the social contract. And so we get the rebellion in 1794 in Western Pennsylvania by our working class farmers who really think they're being given the short end of the stick by the elite Eastern urban government. All right. Where to go with this is how did the Whiskey Rebellion end? It was put down. It was crushed, personally led by George Washington. He assumed his role as commander-in-chief. He led the military out with 13,000 men. And the executive branch is going to make executive decisions because it's their job to make sure that the laws are carried out and executed. The president takes an oath to defend the Constitution. And one of the major things we see here is what comes into question. The big issue is we have this loud minority who thinks what is happening is unfair. You are absolutely allowed to think that. You can speak, you can protest, you can assemble all lawfully. But you have to know your facts. That's why I think history is so important. That's why when you look at your sources, you have to be able to pick out what is correct in your argument. You have to be able to poke holes in your own argument and see if it still holds water. You better have a good argument. In this case, all these states signed on to the Constitution. They ratified the Constitution. The Constitution says that Congress, first thing in Article 1, Section 8, powers of Congress, they have the right to tax. So there's a video that you guys are going to be watching, and one of the main points of the video says, yeah, your representatives in your democracy, they voted, they passed this law. You might not like it, but that's the way this thing works. You can't just take your ball and go home if you think this is unfair. You can point out, you can write letters, you can ask for change, but you better be really right if you're going to bring that gun to your meeting. So how's it going to change the central government? It's not, because the Constitution shows that it has all this stuff lined up. It has the entire process to legally shoot this problem down. Okay, yeah, George Washington does kind of do that. But it's like the Constitution says right to tax, the right to lead a military. The president's job is to execute and carry out the laws. That's what happens. So whereas Shays Rebellion points out the articles are a disaster, Whiskey Rebellion points out the Constitution has all its ducks in a row. It really thought these things out, and it gave all the authority to the federal government to create laws, to create taxes, to enforce the laws. And that's what's going to happen. So on page 209, you're going to read about that. I would definitely want you to do that to know the 5 W's, like where it's happening, when is it happening, who's involved. We got to know our basics. Like I said, it's important to know the details. And this is the video. It's linked in your slides, and it's also linked in your Google classwork folder assignment thing. But here's the deal. At 1 minute. At the 1 minute mark, there's going to be a historian speaking that basically points out why the Whiskey Rebellion was illegitimate and why Washington's reaction is legitimate. So I think that's worthwhile. Kind of the bottom line here is, before I kind of read this off, the problem posed by the Whiskey Rebellion is citizens, a minority of citizens, is shouting down what has been legally passed, and legally approved, and legally processed. And if we're in a civil society with a constitution, with a law, you can't let a minority group, a small minority group, shut down the popular sovereignty, the will of the people, of the majority. Now, if it's unconstitutional, you take it to the courts. If it's unfair and unconstitutional and it's breaking the law, you take it to the courts. Done. If you try to answer it with guns and you don't have a legit reason for it, so the citizens had representation. They lost this debate, the tax debate, but they're not justified in rebelling. We all agree to that. That's the Constitution. All right, so I'm going to leave you guys with that, because here's some big things to think about. And at this point, you guys should start reading your Whiskey Rebellion document. You should have already read the textbook version. You read your document. Make sure you check page 2. It's got some excerpts from the Constitution. And we really want to be able to pick out which ones support your argument and your claim. So you want to use that as good evidence and make sure you show your understanding. All right, so that's it. Thank you. How do I turn this off? I forget.